Good morning, everybody, or should I say good evening. My name is Scott Matheson, and I am the founder of Working in Australia, and I'm delighted to have you all on this webinar. A lot of people on this webinar today. Interest in Australia is at an all-time high, given that we've all been in lockdown all over the world and now desperate to get out and change our lives and make a big change. So welcome. It's fantastic to have you on here. Australia is in need of people, and now is a fantastic time to migrate. So we're going to tell you all about it. We've got some expert panelists on here today for a short 40-minute webinar, which hopefully is your first step and your motivation and your pathway to moving to Australia. So thanks again for joining us, and I'll introduce you now to our panelists. First, over in Sydney is Brett McAdam. Brett, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Hi everyone, my name's Brett. I'm in recruitment, and my role is to help employers recruit people from offshore, as well as people that are moving down to Australia find roles in Australia. I've been in the recruitment industry for about 10 years now. I've lived offshore myself in Ireland, the UK, and most recently now Australia. I'm actually a Kiwi originally from New Zealand. So yeah, that's a wee bit about me.
Thanks, Brett. Yeah. Enjoying the Sydney lifestyle. And another Sydney-sider, Naseem Lalazari, our head of migration, our Mara agent, head of Mara. Naseem, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Thanks, Scott. Hi, everyone. Yes, my name's Naseem. I'm a registered migration agent. I grew up in Sydney, though I was born overseas. I've been working in for almost 11 years and have helped thousands of migrants over that time migrate to the beautiful Down Under.
And that is exactly correct. We actually have literally helped thousands of people move to Australia. Working in has been helping people in this area since 2001, so 20 years this year. We started running expos in the UK and then South Africa and Canada and all around the world, helping people connect with employers and get visas and change their life. So we love doing this. It's what we do. We're very proud of it. We're passionate, and we like to make it simple and clear. And that's what this is about. So really, this is about the immigration process. Obviously, Brett is here because jobs are important to almost every single person that migrates to Australia. But the visa is the most critical part. Australia has, I think, a very complex visa system, in that if you're not quite meeting the requirements, there are multiple avenues. And you really want to make sure that you choose the right avenue, because it could end up costing you a lot of time and a lot of money. So I think, first of all, Naseem, do you just want to introduce a little bit about your team? And also, I think you've got a really interesting past, which makes you so well suited to the immigration business. Can you just tell us a little bit about you and why you got into this? And also, critically, what is a Mara agent? Because I think that is really, really important.
Yeah, sure. So I think we've got up on the screen just a quick snapshot of some of the team members. That's not actually all of us. We're a big team because we're helping lots of people, and we've all got different, experiences and specializations to make sure that, you're getting the right advice to move. So a registered migration agent is someone who is authorised to provide immigration advice specifically for Australia. So myself and several of my colleagues, we're registered with the Office of Migration Agents. It's actually formally called OMARA. So I'm a Mara agent with OMARA, and I have to renew my license every year along with my colleagues in order to be able to provide immigration advice. This is a level of protection for migrants who are looking to move. Everything we do is overseen or bound by a code of conduct, and that's just so that we're doing the right thing for you. So whether you use us, someone else, make sure that that person's a registered migration agent, so that you are actually getting the right advice, and you're not, I guess, winging it with someone who just has good intentions. So that's what a registered migration agent is. So a little bit about my story. It's actually just over 40 years now that my parents migrated to Australia from Illinois in the US as skilled migrants. So very, very long time ago. It's probably giving away my age, which I don't like. But yep, I think up on the screen we've got a picture of me being held by a friend. This is just outside one of the houses in inner city Sydney many, many moons ago. So this was taken immediately after my parents got off a flight, and they were just absolutely wrecked because travel to Australia used to take even longer than it does now with COVID restrictions from one side of the world to the other. So I'm very, very happy that my parents chose to make that move, because that's meant that I've been able to have the life that I do and provide further opportunities for my family outside of the States. So that's me.
Yeah, a very rich and interesting life. Thanks, Nazim. And just touching on that Mara agent topic again, I think one of the most important things from my perspective is, immigration is something that most people only do once in their life. It's a really big move. There's complexities, there's fishhooks, there's people that may not be well intentioned who could be advising you, and you do have to be wary of that. Do you want to explain how the fund works? Because your money is really important, and your money is protected when you're using a Mara agent, and I think that's probably for me the most important part.
Yeah, sure. So any funds that are taken in advance must go into like a client fund. It's almost like a trust account, and it must be set up a certain way to meet requirements. And so like when you use a lawyer, the funds only come out based on the amount of work that's been done. So it stays in there almost like savings for you until you get to the next stage in the process. And only then is it withdrawn, and I guess funds that we've earned, if that makes sense. So that's why it's really important to be working with a registered migration agent. You can find details of registered migration agents on the Amara website. It's highly recommended that you double check that the people that are helping you are registered for that very reason.
Fantastic. Okay. So I guess really now everyone wants to know, well, how can I move to Australia? Why is it a good time to move to Australia? Is it a good time to move to Australia? I mean, we're in a COVID environment and people are in lockdown. How can it be? The reality is that since March 20, when the borders were shut, a lot of people left Australia, and now that the economy is growing again, we have a skills shortage. So Brett, I mean, can you just sort of give us an indication of what that means out there in the job market? You're in the job market all day, every day. What are the sort of stats that are being flown around in terms of shortages, unemployment rate, that sort of thing?
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, recently the unemployment rate nationally dropped down to sort of around that 4.5%, which is really historic lows for Australia. It's now sort of hovering nationally around that sort of 5.1. I think the most recent stats that came out, and state by state, I mean, you get to places like WA, Western Australia, should I say, Northern Territory, those sort of unemployment rates there sitting around 3.9, the high 3 points. They've got massive shortages. You hear about it all the time, particularly Western Australia. It's cut off from the rest of the country. A lot of skilled migrants went home. The borders have been shut to the local workforce around the country as well. So mining, construction, healthcare, they're really crying out for people. Look, you just see it and hear about it everywhere. You hear about it in the news. So, I mean, healthcare workers. I mean, I see it just walking out of the house. I go up to the local shopping centre, and the butcher up there is not doing turkeys, for example, because there's skill shortages in that industry. So literally you see it on signs on the shops right through to hearing about it, the big projects in the construction and engineering and construction side of things. So it's very topical. I think the country's really seen across the board just how big an impact skilled migration has on the economy and how important it is to the economy. So, I'm definitely now with recent announcements, a lot more interest as well. I guess it's heating up even more in terms of employers wanting to, target people from offshore but want to move down to Australia. So, yeah, lots happening on that front. Said very low unemployment figures, and it just seems to be hitting every sector. Agriculture, engineering, construction, health, hospitality, HR, recruitment, you name it. you're all feeling it.
Yeah, so I mean, and I guess to explain this a little bit more is that we're in a country, and especially places like Australia and New Zealand or Canada, when they are suffering from skills shortages, you know, the immigration policies, sort of someone explained it to me as that it's like a breathing lung. And when you have shortages and the country needs people, then the lung expands and the immigration policy opens. And then when there's a surplus of people, then the policies tighten, the lung contracts, and essentially the window of immigration closes. At the moment, the window is very much open. So, Naseem, it's true to say that Australia is very clear about their immigration policy. It's very clear about the sorts of people that they are wanting, and it's very clear that the policies reflect the job market. So can you just explain the different ways, or the main ways, let's say, that people who are on this webinar, and by the way, ask questions, go for it, ask questions, we'll answer. If we can't answer now, we'll answer later. There's a lot of you on here. We really want to help you. It doesn't matter if you don't use us, just ask away and we'll try as much as possible to assist. But Naseem, you know, what are those main policies that people can get into Australia by, and how do they sort of tie into the job market?
Yeah, sure. So I always talk about the subclass 189 as being the gold standard. You know, that's the visa that you want to qualify for. It is skilled migration purely based on your skills as a migrant. You're on a list that's been identified as being of a high need across the country, and you don't need a job offer, you don't need any sponsorship or nomination. And if you qualify, you know, welcome. The next one after that is your subclass 190, and that's a state-sponsored visa. That's for occupations that are still in demand, but not as much as perhaps those that qualify under the subclass 189. Now, in this instance, you're going to need a state to sponsor you in order to qualify to migrate. If you are an individual whose occupation is on a subclass 189, but you just need the extra points, then we can also look at the subclass 190. Sometimes clients will use that as a fast track to the front of the queue because states do get a certain allocation to be able to move along the people that they need to join their state to help contribute to the growth locally. And then you've also got your regional sorts of visas that will have you moving out to outside of the major cities and generally into areas where, again, the state government is trying to encourage people to come and settle and help with the growth of that area by bringing their the skills that they've got that the government's already identified as being of need. So in general, you don't actually need a job offer in general to migrate and qualify for migration to Australia. Sometimes you do, but most of the times you don't. And we do find that a lot of times people who've already got their visa sort of underway or sorted, it's easier then to maybe be a little bit picky and choosy about where you might want to go in Australia in terms of taking up a job that might be available to you. So those are the main sort of migration pathways. There are also temporary pathways that can lead to migration, but the ones that I've talked about are generally the ones where you can have a little bit more control over the process and you can be moving it along because you have less reliance on somebody else doing something for you to be able to push that process, towards the visa, if that makes sense.
So I guess for people that are watching this, what should you be doing? How do you know if you'll qualify for the 189, the 494, the 190? And if you don't, what are your options? I mean, you said that there's other temporary options. That's obviously not as ideal as what you call the gold standard 189. But yeah, so how do people know whether they fit in or not?
So in all my years of experience, you actually need to get proper individual advice specific to you. So what we found is sometimes the same role is called something different in different countries. And so people will say, oh, I definitely qualify, I can do this or that. It might appear that way on the face of it, but once we get down into the nitty-gritty of the detail, we might find that actually you can't nominate that occupation. You should be looking at an alternative occupation for migration purposes, or that you can't claim some of the points that you think you can, again, because you don't know the detail that goes into immigration policy and the regulations. So what we do is get all, and people always say, oh, why do I have to provide so much information? It's like, well, the advice we can give you is exponentially tied to the quality of the information or data you give us. So the more information we have about you, the easier it is for us to come back and say, look, you've got all of these options, and this is what you need to do to proceed. Or, maybe you don't have as many, but we found all these other alternatives that you can then, decide to proceed and move forward with. Once you've got that information, you're in a better position to decide how you actually want to proceed. So if you know that you have a pathway, you can then choose to actually, run with it, as opposed to just hoping.
Yeah, hope is not a strategy.
No.
So one of the things that we do is we have a free eligibility assessment. It's quite a basic one, but at least it allows you to fill in that information, send it to Nazim and her team. They'll look at it, and they'll basically come back to you and say, hey, listen, looks as though you do qualify based on the very small amount of information that you provided. And we'll invite you to a consultation with Nazim or one of our team in South Africa or the UK. So we've got teams of people around the world who can talk to you about your individual situation. And then if you want to take that next step further, there's a fee. It's not a big fee. It's 295 Australian dollars. Nazim, correct me if I'm correct. I think it's that.
Yeah, it's about 395 or 195 pounds.
1 year, yeah. So let's call it 350 Australian dollars. We'll get the exact price. But the main thing about that is that it's a full eligibility assessment that Nazim's team will go right through and understand you, your partner, your children. And then you have a 1 hour consultation with them to fully understand the best possible route. And, after that, you can do as you choose. But in all our experience, we know that if you've got your strategy set right at the beginning and it's clear and it's delivered to you by a registered MARA agent, which means it's accurate, then you've basically got your template for moving to Australia for under 500 Australian dollars. So it's quite for us, we think it's your insurance, and that's how people talk about it. It's your insurance policy, and it means that you don't need to go elsewhere, spend hours trawling the internet and so forth. Now, if you're able to come down on one of these routes that is shown here on the 189, the 190, the 494, then Brett may be able to help you. I mean, Brett's role is to, obviously help people with jobs. You may not need a job to get the visa, but, Brett, can you explain a little bit about what you do? I mean, you're working with some of the biggest companies in Australia, so there is a demand out there and you can help people. So can you just take us through what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my role really, if you are heading down here, is really to understand what you're looking for. It's a big country, there's lots of employers. Get a bit of guidance from you. We are working with a number of companies across Australia. We've got a lot of networks that we can tap into. So we might be able to open some doors for you. We may have active roles that we're currently recruiting for our clients that might be suitable for you. So it really is sort of a two-pronged approach. What roles do we have at the moment? Are any of these sort of within the sort of parameters of what you'd be looking to do in Australia? And secondly, okay, well, who are our clients, who in our networks in Australia can we have a chat to on your behalf, see if we can introduce you to some people. So really need first to get understanding of what you'd be sort of looking for. What part of Australia do you want to live in? Obviously your working background and that side of things, and what's important for you in your job and the company that you work for. So those would be the sort of main things we'd be looking for, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, I think from what my discussions I've had with you and what we've seen over the years, employers do want to see some sort of commitment though. And I'll explain this in another way, just to be quite blunt. Coming out of COVID, Australia has become extraordinarily popular. I mean, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people around the world are thinking of migrating. And so a lot of employers they just shut up shop. They can't deal with all the international applications. There's too many, and also the borders have been shut. So in order to get in touch with those employers, Brett needs to demonstrate that you've passed the eligibility assessment, you meet the criteria, and you're sort of committed to the move. So that's quite a big part of it, because that raises you up and puts you in a position where you're sort of competing with a local candidate, and that's really where you want to be. The employer doesn't want to know, oh gosh, I'm talking to this person who looks amazing on paper, and wow, they've got all this experience, but they've still got all these steps to do in order to even get here. So, Nazim, we talk about preparation, don't we? It's like the first strategy in this whole process is preparation. And even though Brett's on this webinar, we don't really want you to be talking to him quite yet, unless you've actually already lodged your visa. So, Nazim, what is the sort of preparation that people need to be doing when we talk about preparation? Because if you haven't started, there's absolutely no point in talking to an employer at this point. In fact, it's damaging, right?
Oh, totally. Like Brett was mentioning, where do you want to live? So one of the assessments we did in the last week, there was only 2 states that this individual could, realistically even move to if they're wanting to migrate permanently. So there's no point, if you don't know that, to start talking to every employer in every other state than the one that you qualify for. And so, that's what we mean about, we really need to see what your options are so you can be preparing properly. So once you know what you can do, the first step after that is to start your skills assessment. So a skills assessment is a part of the migration process that the Australian government just has. I don't know, I'm not quite sure why they decided it. But what it does mean is that if, for example, you are a carpenter, you need to go through a process with VetAssess. You would do a 2-stage skills assessment process, and at the end of it, VetAssess has the authority to say, yes, this person can call themselves a carpenter for migration purposes, and here is their skills assessment outcome. That allows you to then move on with the visa application process in terms of submitting your EOI, and if you've got that and you know which states you can migrate to, and maybe you're talking to Brett and he's got an employer who's desperate to hire you. If you've got that skills assessment, we can try to talk to the employer about helping you with your PR, because now you qualify. So there's a lot of stuff that you can be preparing to make yourself move ready, but also whether that's with or without an employer. But we can't tell you what that's going to be if we don't know what your situation is and what the actual options you have are based on the different subclasses that you might qualify for.
My apologies, I was on mute there. So look, there are some restrictions around Australia, particularly with age. I think a lot of people understand the age, but do you want to explain what is the age limit and when is the last date an applicant can submit their application for permanent residency?
Yeah, so as a general rule, you need to be under 45 years of age. So you need to be less than 45 the day you lodge your visa application. So that doesn't include any of the steps before, which is, finding out that you qualify, getting a skills assessment, lodging your EOI, getting invited to apply, getting your state nomination if you're required, and then lodging the visa application. So ideally, you wouldn't leave it to the last minute to decide that you're wanting to migrate. Anyone who's sort of early 40s, now would be the time to find out right now, because you need to make sure that you've given yourself enough of a time buffer based on all the steps that might be required. So, yeah.
So, Nazim, I'll be honest, I missed that threshold if I was migrating, but I'm under 55. So what would my next best option be?
Yeah, well, the first thing we would do is actually see if there's any state in a regional area that your occupation qualifies potentially for an age waiver. There's not many, but they do pop up every now and then. If that's not possible and we can't find an easy, like a pathway for you, as a licensed immigration advisor, I would then be saying, why don't we have a look at New Zealand? New Zealand is another country with similar beautiful weather down in the South Pacific that needs a lot of the exact same skills that Australia is looking to recruit. The difference being is that for New Zealand, you have up until your 56th birthday in order to migrate. Once you have New Zealand residency, you can in the future obtain New Zealand citizenship, and that might be a way that you can then move over to Australia on the basis of having a New Zealand passport and qualifying for something called a subclass 444 visa. So it's a special category visa just for New Zealand citizens. So there's potentially other ways.
There are options. So if you are 45 or coming to 45 and you don't have time's running out, and 45 is still young, right? Then maybe you can have a look at what other options that might be available, and some of that sort of state stuff buried underneath the fine print. Or as Nazim said, you could potentially look at Australia. Look, so we've still got up on screen that sort of a gold standard, the offerings that need a job, that don't need a job offer. But back in the day, the 457 was a very popular visa. That no longer exists, but there is a 482 temporary visa. Do you just want to explain how that works? It's a much longer process for people, and that's where Brett would have to get involved. But can you just explain how it would be, because some people may not qualify?
Yeah, sure. So the subclass 482 is a temporary visa, so it's based on specifically on a job offer. So you need to have that job offer in order to qualify, and you need to again have an occupation on one of the lists, whether it's the MLTSSL, the short-term, one of the others. Not all roles that qualify for one of these work visas will lead to residence. Some do, some don't. The ones that do, you need to be employed by your sponsoring employer for at least 3 years. And then after that, if your employer is still willing to support you, they can then put forward a PR application. The only time that it can be less than 3 years is if you've got a positive skills assessment, and again, the employer can sponsor you directly for PR. So it brings us back to that skills assessment, and do you qualify to get one?
And so, look, there seems to be a lot of work here to do. People wanting to know, well, what do I do? Do I do my skill assessment now, or what's the next step?
The first step is to find out that you actually qualify for a visa at the end. Some people can get a skills assessment and not qualify for a visa. So that's a very expensive exercise if it's not going to help you with anything. So the first step is actually getting in touch with us. We can do a quick review of some basic information. And then if we think you've got a pathway, we'll invite you to a chat or to do a detailed in-depth assessment. And then as part of that, we'll be able to go exactly through what all the options may or may not be. And then you can decide, okay, well, now that I know, do I go ahead with the skills assessment? Do I go to, practice my English because I want to get extra points? Do I work on my tan because I'm planning to be in sunny Queensland? Whatever it might be. But we need to do that assessment so we can actually then go through what the options are. And you can decide, with the pathway that is available when you want to start.
Okay, fantastic. So I think you've made it really, really clear, Nazim. I think that probably the only thing that we haven't really discussed is money. Australia is quite an expensive place to come to. Brett, I know that some of your clients who you're talking to or engaged with and they're interviewing candidates from offshore, some of those people are being offered relocation allowances. Is that correct? How does that work?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I have got some clients at the moment that are recruiting specialised roles offshore, and they are, willing to help assist with relocation, flights, temporary accommodation. That obviously varies from employer to employer. What level of relocation, if any relocation? Look, some people won't offer any relocation assistance, and some people will. So it really is a case-by-case basis. It's certainly not a given, but there's definitely companies out there that are willing to look, and often depend on what your occupation is, how that's and how in demand and how hard that is to find down here as well. So yeah, but definitely some people are.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to set that expectation that employers will contribute to a relocation allowance, but some of the more senior roles, it's certainly happening, which does make it a little bit easier. But Nazim, coming back to those fees, You've got the skill assessment, which is through VetAssess. How much does the Australian government charge for that?
So just to clarify, VetAssess might have a $3,000 application fee. Different skill assessing authorities will have various ones.
This is true. Sorry, I shouldn't be pushing one in particular. I'm just using an example. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, when it comes to actually applying for the visa, you're looking at, $4,000 just for the principal applicant when you get to the final stage. So, every family member has a separate fee. So if you've got a really big family, it can be quite expensive. If it's just you, it'd just be the 4,000. But you've also got other costs to consider. If there's a state sponsorship process, if there's a fee associated with that state, police clearances, medicals, or anything else. So yeah, in general, migrating to Australia is not cheap. Having said that, we find that there's no shortage of people who do actually want to migrate. I think the Australian government knows that as well. And they've increased their fees quite a lot since I first started in this industry 11 years ago. So it's something to be prepared for if you are really, committed to moving to Australia.
Fantastic. All right. Look, I think we've taken up enough of everyone's time. It's late in the evening over in Europe. And I think we've summarised the basic ways in which you can actually move to Australia, either through the 189, 190 subclass streams, which means you don't need a job offer. And if you can't qualify for that, then there may be the 482. And don't worry, if you're over 45, there may well be other options. We just need to understand that as well. So we really invite you to take that free eligibility assessment. It's free. There's no harm done. We're not going to push anything on you. All we'll do is tell you that if you do qualify on the face of it, we'll invite you to have a consultation with Nazim for 10 or 15 minutes about your particular situation. Maybe it's your children, maybe it's your partner, maybe it's about you and your job and whether you actually meet the requirements. So that's the way we work. And then once you get to know us, if you want to go further, that's great. But really, I'll just reiterate, in all the time that we've been doing this, which is 20 years, coming out of COVID, I guess the opportunity to move to Australia has never been better. You've got this incredible demand from employers. Every employer, as Brett was saying, across the country is looking for people. I mean, I read somewhere the other day that there's a shortage of 100,000 people in the hospitality industry, and it's affecting whether pubs can open or people can hire baristas to make a good coffee, and that's just a tragedy, right? So there is a skills shortage, which means Australia is looking offshore, which means immigration is on. The window is open. It's only open for so long. You do want to be at the front of the queue because there's a huge amount of people that want to move to Australia, and once those jobs are filled, they're filled, and then it's going to get harder. So there is a logic to this, and you're here on this webinar, and I think this is really, really important information that if you've ever dreamed on this, now is the time. So we encourage you to fill out that eligibility assessment. We'll get back to you, and from there, look, the ball's in your court, but at least you have a path. So I just want to say thank you very much for joining us. Brett, do you have any final words?
Just, get started, have a look at that visa eligibility. That's the first step. Show employers down here that you're invested in the process, that you're committed to making that move, and then check that out.
Game on.
And Nazim.
Yep, I'm always about preparation. Everything always takes longer than we'd like. So if you're thinking that you want to be moving within the next 2 years, you actually need to start now.
Well, you have started now because you're on this webinar. So after this, take the next step. And look, we really hope to see you down under. We really hope that we can help you. And we really hope that you found this valuable and informative. And so bid you good evening or good afternoon, and hope to see you again. Thank you very much. Bye.